we will be facing a set rotation for the first time in this TCG. And I know there's mixed feelings about it, but to understand, other TCGs have always had set rotations. It has always been a thing. And we're going to approach this with an open mind, and we're going to try to explain it the best we can of what set rotation is, why set rotation is happening, and why it is a good thing, or why it can be a good thing, because we do know that there are mixed feelings about it. But first and foremost, do know that when the ninth set, and again, we should have some sort of image up showing this off, but when the ninth set, Fabled, gets here, whenever it comes to core constructed, which we talked about this with Hiram and Fortisphere being banned. This isn't necessarily what you play at home or play with your friends or anything. This is like League, DLCs, set championships, Worlds, now that we have a date, any of the big Ravensburger events or 2Ks or anything that anybody participates in. Core constructed, when the ninth set gets here, sets 1 through 4. So from the first chapter all the way to Inklands, those cards will not be in core constructed.
including
With
Ursula's Return.
yeah, including Ursula's Return. So that is with some exceptions, and we will get to those exceptions. But then moving forward, this is going to be something that's not just a one-off. It is going to continue to happen. So whenever we reach the 13th set, whatever that one is titled, then sets 5 through 8. So what is that? Shimmering Skies, Azurite Sea, Arcasia's Island, and then whatever comes after. Those sets will then be removed from core constructed.
That'd be Jafar.
Would be Jafar. So just recently, again, we talked about the Hiram and Fortisphere ban. So with this idea of set rotation now happening, and we didn't know about it before, and everybody was throwing a fit about Hiram, and I was throwing a fit about Fortisphere. We now know that those bans are only going to be in effect for what, the rest of Reign of Jafar, and then as soon as Fabled gets here, those cards would have been gone anyways. So they legitimately only went in and banned Hiram and Fortisphere for Worlds before they announced when Worlds was, to try to get the meta situated and try to get like the decks figured out. That way you didn't just have over 50% of your player base playing Sapphire decks.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think it's also important to realize, and again, I realize that folks might be looking at the graphic on the screen or listening to this episode, thinking that's 4 sets. The first chapter, Floodborn, into Rise of the Floodborn, into the Inklands, and Ursula's Return, that are no longer legal in core constructed. Now, again, just like Dylan mentioned, it's core constructed. You can still play with friends and whatnot. Dylan will talk about a additional game mode as well, but why these things happen is important to understand as well. Because again, I am a first-time TCG player. Dylan's a first-time TCG player. We are all learning and learning this industry together. But the reason why these set rotations happen, not only coming soon in Lorcana, but many other TCGs, is because the card pool gets too big and they don't want it to reach that point. And they also want to keep things fresh and whatnot. But also, whenever it comes to the acquisition of finding cards from the first chapter, Rise of the Floodborn, I mean, think about it. I haven't seen the first chapter on shelves in a very long time. So I haven't seen it in a very long time. So that is why these things happen. That is why the set rotations happen. I have some thoughts, but I'll save them for later, kind of our wrap up and whatnot. But it's wild to think that Reign of Jafar is only going to be legal for 15 months.
Yeah,
Long time, granted. That's a long time.
but then we'll say the same thing about Fabled whenever it gets here. Because
Right.
it'll be or whatever the 13th set is. I mean, some of these sets we will definitely get to spend more time with.
Yep. Absolutely. And I think it's a net I think overall it's a net positive at the end of the day. Again, we are tackling this with an open mind. It's kind of exciting to think that, like, we'll talk about some of the other variables and cards and stuff like that, but it's kind of exciting to think that we've come this far because, again, and John can hold me accountable, but we were only supposed to have how many sets in the beginning? Like four, three, four?
I can't remember now. I think they were only contracted for 5 originally.
I know we've talked about it before,
Yeah,
but
it's
the
been so
thing,
long I can't remember now. I'd have to look it up again. I can't remember. I want to say it was
yeah,
5. We knew the
it
first
sounds
5,
right.
and that was it. Something like that.
But to
Either
think
way,
that,
this game shouldn't exist anymore.
right,
And
in theory, like, and here we are talking about rotating out the oldest sets. It's almost an exciting milestone, really. I'm sure like people may think of set rotations like, oh, like set rotations, but like the game is progressing at the end of the day. So that's just
and
my
it's really
immediate take.
helping new players
Yeah,
because there's
that's
so
the
many new
important.
players that are getting into this game now who, like
Yep.
you said, whenever it comes to acquisition, it may be more difficult for them to actually get some of those big set pieces from the first chapter or Rise of the Floodborn or other previous sets to really compete and be able to level out a playing field and hold up competition with other people who have been in this from the beginning. So with set rotation, it kind of like refreshes thing and puts everybody on a equal footing to an extent whenever it comes to access to cards.
Also power creep as well, because it's like, I feel like with every set so far, I feel like we've kind of done this with power creep.
Yeah.
Like I think about the first chapter, the vanilla, then Rise of the Floodborn. We got all these new mechanics. And then we got into the Inklings. And I even think about like Tamatoa, for example. Like we had the Tamatoa in the first chapter where you quested for however many items you had to play. And now it's like in I almost forgot what set we're in Arcasia's Island. We have this other Tamatoa. We have this other Tamatoa that's slightly better than like equal, if not slightly better. So with each set, they've continued to build and build and build and build and make more and more and more powerful cards. And I think this kind of neutralizes that. And we'll talk about reprints in a moment, but it kind of neutralizes that and kind of it makes it go from here to back down here. And it's like, okay, we can start to build back up again. Because if we didn't have set rotation, they would just have to continue building and building and building and building, make these so powerful cards. And then who knows what would happen to the game at that point. So I think in general, it's going to be a net positive. There's a lot of news around Fable we're getting ready to talk about, but with set rotations and core constructed, I'm a little excited
Yeah,
about what they announced.
that leaves another question that a lot of people within this
Yeah.
community that are new to TCGs are asking is okay, cool. What happens to all of my other old cards or all this money that I've spent on this cardboard? What do we do with these old cards now? And that now introduces Infinity Constructed, which is a whole new way to play. And this will be not necessarily core constructed, but they will have other events wrapped around this new type where you will be allowed to use any of your cards from previous sets. Whenever it comes to Hiram and Fortisphere, that question really hasn't been answered, but they have came out and said that Infinity Constructed will have its own ban list. So we'll see how that works. But they do plan on incorporating this and having events, whether it's side events or whatever else. I don't necessarily think it'll be like an entire DLC bracket that they have, but they'll definitely have events whenever it comes to Infinity Constructed, and it is something that people at League and at home are not pushed to play, but just say, hey, you do have this other format that you're welcome to try out and play if you choose to, and it's just another way that you can play with all of your cards. So none of them go to waste. You don't have to feel bad about rotation whenever it comes to not being able to play with some of your old favorite cards anymore because they're still there. You can still play with them. And I think we've already talked about why it's happening. And again, like the where will you see this at? In the past, Ravensburger has kind of been like open minded whenever it comes to LGSs, They've pushed out a piece of paper or a slip or some type of news or format that says, hey, this is how we think you should run your store or run Lorcana at your store, but it's really up to your store to follow. So we'll see. I'm still up for debate or up to more news whenever it comes out, especially with the Ravensburger Player Hub not really existing yet, of what they're wanting us to do. But I can see most stores just sticking with core constructed.
Yeah,
That seems to be the big format.
I think that's the format. I mean, we're all accustomed to it. We've been playing it for almost 2 years now, which is wild to say. But I think it opens up the door for like stores to have maybe just something to do every so often. Because in theory, what this is you would have like your core constructed nights, your regular weekly play, your organized play, and then maybe depending on the community, there might be enough people interested in Infinity, which would be its own recurring weekly event at a local game shop. So it's kind of exciting for as a not as a shop owner, but I would imagine it's kind of exciting for shop owners because they now have another format that I believe is going to be a little bit more popular than Pack Rush in my opinion, because Pack Rush requires 4 packs per match essentially. So I am
The
curious to
the big
see.
thing the big thing I want to compare this to, again, I mean, this is our first LGS. Other TCGs, or this is our first TCG, other TCGs have different formats,
Mhm,
but you're saying that Infinity is really going to be based upon the community. Depending on how popular it becomes within the community, the closest thing we can compare this to is Magic the Gathering, which,
yeah.
hey, maybe a lot of people listening to this isn't your first TCG and you've played Magic before, so you know exactly what I'm saying, because there are tons of different formats. But the biggest outside of Standard is Commander. And
Mhm,
looking at our own LGS that we attend, Magic is the only TCG that I see that has multiple nights with different
mhm.
formats of they'll have Standard on one night and they'll have Commander on a different night, and none of your other TCGs are doing that. So I don't know if Lorcana has the popularity behind it. I hate to say that because I mean that's the audience we're talking to, but in comparison to other TCGs that are a lot older, I don't know if it'll work that way. Maybe not at our LGS as much as we want it to, but maybe somewhere out there, and if we could get the community to back it, that could become a thing.
Yeah, like I
We'll
think
see.
about our own store, like for example, our own group where we have 7 to 13 people on an average night, and I think for a lot of the smaller stores and more rural communities that have card shops, I think it's going to be hard to have another Lorcana night per se. I think it's going to be
Yep.
based off population of your shop in your area. So, I mean, it's probably a conversation that store owners are probably going to have with their own community, but I would imagine most are going to continue with core constructed. So, but it's nice, you know. Again, we think about the couple weeks that we had there a while back where we had a theme night, and you know, in between league ending, we could say, hey, for the next 2 weeks, it's going to be Infinity. It's nothing too crazy. You still have your rules and whatnot. I know we kind of made our own rules in a sense and had like a guideline for theme night, but it's a Ravensburger endorsed format that stores have a little bit more flexibility to do because maybe the Lorcana community will grow in your area and there's a good chunk of you that go, I just like Infinity. Well, you know, never say never.
Well, if you look at the other store, you know, we've got at least 2 other stores in the area. One store didn't even change the rules for league this time. They're still playing
Mm,
league like the old league, keeping track of points. Every 4 weeks you get prizes, stuff like that. They
mm.
may, who knows, you may have a store in your area that just does the Infinity, that doesn't do
Maybe.
constructed. Who knows?
Yeah.
It really just falls back onto what Ravensburger says going forward, which, I mean, that's a whole other can of worms that, I mean, we may talk about it later on, but with the Players Hub, it slightly opened up for people to go on there, whether that was just a server test or whatever it was. But from the previous things that we've saw in the past, the Ravensburger Player Hub was supposed to open up before the launch of Reign of Jafar. So your release events that are supposed to take place on May 30th are supposed to be taking place through the Ravensburger Play app, not Melee or not any other thing going forward. And that, like, all of your league nights, your set championships, everything going forward is supposed to be run through that app. Yet, if you get on there right now, it still says that it's under server maintenance or whatever the issue is.
Mm.
So whatever they decide with that and whatever rules they push out, we'll see. But up to this point, it's kind of just been a guideline of here's what we would like you to do, but you know how to run your LGS. And no matter where you go throughout the country, it's different from store to store. There's been no consistency. Yeah. Even whenever it comes to the pre-release events.
Pack rush is a thing. We like our sealed, but